in some sense, what I most like about the Nobel Prize is you get these great experiences.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Eleonora Svanberg, and I have the honor to speak with this year's Nobel Prize laureate in physics, Professor John Martinis. How are you? Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I went to the student night last night, a little bit sleepy right now, but I think I'll make it okay. It was really fun. I stayed too late. I was going to stay about an hour, and I stayed about 2.5 hours, but that's because it was fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a great party. It's quite funny because I personally said I can't go because I would be too tired. But then I
Yes.
heard that you went, so I have no excuse.
Okay.
It sounds fun. And yeah, how's the rest of your week been?
Oh, it's been a fantastic week. Lots of fun. Enjoyed giving the lecture, shaking the king's hand, and the ceremony yesterday was great. The concert, my wife absolutely loved. Was a music major and really appreciated the amazing skill of the violinist.
Yeah.
That's like a prodigy level skill of the piece that was done. I couldn't tell,
Right.
but my wife. So she was kind of tired the next day from clapping so hard.
Oh,
It was great.
That's lovely. A good source.
It's kind of a family event. My wife's here, and we've been enjoying it and invited a bunch of friends too, and
wonderful.
we've all celebrated together.
And how have they found it? Have you?
Everyone's been having fun
Yeah.
and learning things. I learned a lot from the economics Nobel Prize this year because it had to do with technology, but there are things that I had seen in my field that they see in other fields. It's kind of a standard business economic thing that happened. So I would say that's the most that I learned so much from even their poster. The
Right.
description of the
Yeah, yeah.
poster I learned something from, which is always fun.
Yeah, of
learning
course.
things.
Have you had a chance to talk to?
Yes,
the
yes,
laureates
we've
a lot?
had some time.
Yeah.
I've asked some questions, okay.
Yeah.
And the Nobel minds, they're talking about using these moths for doing carbon sequestering. So afterwards, I started peppering him with questions about the cost and how you
Right.
scale it and
Yeah.
get the energy. And he had some really interesting, ideas there. He answered it very nicely. I like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe a little future collaboration.
Yeah, I don't know if I can help him much, but I certainly like asking questions. Okay, it's very, very, very nice that all the things people are doing.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably one of the most fun things about this week, that there's so many
Right.
different discoveries,
Right,
and we
right.
can highlight all of that amazing work.
And for example, in the medal ceremony, they had a very nice summary of the physics of the
Yes.
physics prize, also the
Did
other
you
prize.
like? Did you like?
Yeah, yeah, it
That
was
was
very
with the
nice, and
skiing.
I'm sure they worked very hard getting that right, and also learning about the other prizes
Yeah,
too, and that was
course.
really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, quantum physics is quite hard. Quantum tunneling is very hard. I mean, personally, I think I find it the most, probably the weirdest thing one can study. How did you end up doing that?
So it's a real thrill to have done a basic physics experiment that doesn't come along very often. So the story, I talk a little bit about that in my Nobel lecture, but when I went into graduate school, I had taken a class from John Clarke as undergraduate.
Oh,
And
really?
I liked his teaching style. I liked him personally. And then he was doing these experiments on quantum noise in these electronic devices, which I found kind of interesting. And my hobby was electronics. I've just taken quantum mechanics courses, and you want to learn more about quantum mechanics. So interesting. So I decided to join his group. So I did a startup experiment, first couple of years was fine. And then I went to a conference in UCLA, low T 16, I think, low temperature 16. And there were talks about the subject from the theorists.
Wow.
And Tony Leggett and others were explaining why it's important and why you want to test quantum mechanics at the macroscopic level,
Yeah.
because maybe it wouldn't have been quantum mechanics. We didn't know. It was an experiment. there were some experiments out there, and the results were a little bit murky. It really didn't nail it down. So, I talked to my advisor, that I found this really interesting. And I imagine at the time John was thinking about it too, and whatever. So John and Michel Devoret came for a postdoc, and I, got together and decided to really focus on it. And all we wanted to do was do a really good experiment and give a definitive yes or no whether, the macroscopic variables obey quantum mechanics.
I mean, that's a hard question, though, but
Yeah, well, at the time, of course, everyone thought, well, of course it would be, but it hadn't been measured.
no.
But what happened is by really thinking carefully about the system and explaining it in a clear way, measuring parameters so that we could understand what was going on. And in the end, it's a microwave circuit experiment. So you have to combine microwave electronics, circuit theory, with quantum mechanics and the like. So once you get that all understood, throw in filtering, all the common things you have to do, we could do the experiment. But what it really did is it laid the foundation for building more and more complex circuits.
Yeah.
So that, after that experiment, I went to France to work with Michel. We did a more complicated experiments. Other people started coming into the field and testing things out, and it grew into a big field.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And what's very interesting in the economics Nobel Prize, they talk about how you get sustained growth.
Yeah.
And initially you have some like practical knowledge of what's going on, which is kind of the state of the field in the very early 80s. And by us combining it with really good theoretical and experimental concepts, we turned it into a propositional knowledge, which is what they talk about, where we basically have a very firm theoretical foundation.
Yeah.
And according to the economics model, once you do that, then you can grow and change and do more and more complex things. And it's been 40 years of many, many people around the world that's been developing that. And, that's, I credit the whole field for trying to do really good experiments, but it was nice to kind of set the field in motion, with this experiment and set it and kind of set the standard of how you should be doing these experiments. But I have to say, I have to also credit another thing, and that's nature. So nature allowed us to have stable enough junctions and other components that we were building so that we could do good experiments. If nature hadn't cooperated, well, we wouldn't be talking here today, frankly. But nature was very kind to us too. But you have to take advantage. And people had to work around nature because there are problems that occur and you have to design, in the end, the qubits in the right way, or else, you won't get it to work properly.
Yeah.
But people figured that out. Everyone figured that out. It's pretty neat.
But did you expect this when you did these experiments? Like, did you expect all of these applications and how big it was? Did you expect to receive the Nobel Prize?
No to all of that. Okay. Well, so let me answer this in maybe historical order. So when we did the first experiment, it was just a very basic physics experiment. However, when I was writing my thesis, I was invited to a conference in Santa Barbara where they talked about macroscopic quantum tunneling and this physics. But as the last speaker, they had Richard Feynman, who's a very famous,
also Nobel
Prize winner, a really creative person. And, actually one of my personal heroes. So
Same.
Just because of the way he explains things in a way people can understand.
I feel like he taught me quantum physics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he has a nice way to explain it, which I've tried to emulate as much as I can. He's a master at it. But he gave a talk on quantum computing.
Wow.
And I'm going to say, at the time, I didn't understand it deeply, what he was doing. But afterwards, he just got mobbed by everyone with questions. And I knew that was like an important, great idea.
Yeah.
And there'd be a lot of physics involved. It kind of reminded me in a way in 1982 when we were talking about macroscopic quantum mechanics and
Yeah.
Leggett. But, it wasn't mob like a
Yeah.
Feynman mob, okay?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people, and I could, I was just a poor graduate student, so I was way outside the ring of people,
Right.
and could hear a little bit. But the important thing is I knew it was a good question, right? You wanna
Yeah.
keep your eye out for a
Yeah.
good question, and there's lots of unknowns, a lot of things to discover, and of course in the next few years, Peter Shor with the factoring algorithm, error correction, lots of other people developing the ideas, and but at the same time we were just developing the technology and science of what we're doing, and then when it became a little bit more mature, then we could jump into it. So that was completely surprising, that
Yeah.
this theoretical idea,
Yeah.
and the fact that you could come up with a one useful algorithm at the time
Yeah, no,
was kind of surprise. And then, okay, the government wanted to invest in this,
Yeah.
which was good, and that kind of naturally drew me in. But yeah, the reason I'm here talking to you today is it was a great experiment, and fortunately people understand now that was a fundamental science good
Yeah.
experiment. But I would say the most important thing is that it led to all this, let's say, qubit research and research and there's thousands of people working on it right now, which I'm really happy with, that all these physicists can be employed at, let's say, big companies with good salaries. I mean, I certainly was able to save money to buy a really nice house. So it's great that we can be focusing on that.
So I'm a graduate student,
Right.
so I've started to taste what research looks like, and in my experience, it comes with some challenges sometimes.
Right.
It goes up and down. How do you deal with those? Has there been any challenges in your research
So
career?
yeah, so what I when I tell students, generally they're like seniors as the undergraduate, and they're thinking about graduate school or something, and it's like you've been going to school for forever, it seems like, and you're going to graduate school and do some school more, but then do research. But the thing you have to realize is how little you know about doing research.
Yeah.
And it's a long learning process, and it's a lifelong learning process. So for example, even right now, although I know the physics of my field pretty well, I have a startup company, so I'm learning about business and economics, which is why I'm so interested in this year. So you just have to learn a tremendous amount, and it takes a long time to learn this, some faster than others.
Right.
But your job in graduate school is to do all the trial and errors and figure out how to do it, figure out how to give a talk. And then, so by the time you graduate, you kind of know how to do independent research.
Right.
But that takes you, X years. I don't know how long it takes here, but it takes you some time. And then if you want to stay in academic research, you do the postdoc. And the purpose of the postdoc is do what you did as a graduate student, but in 1 or 2 years. Because you have to do it fast.
Right.
Which makes sense. You're already kind of trained, and you have to do that. And of course, at the same time, you're learning your field and all the tricks and many other things. So all that is very hard.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other problem is you're working on a thesis project, and you don't know if you can solve it, right? Because if you knew, someone would have solved it, right? So
I mean,
there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole point is
so all
no
that
one
is
knows.
hard.
Yeah.
And just you're learning new. It's hard. And at the same time, you're trying to grow professionally and communicate. And then you should be looking at your field and thinking, well, what would be an interesting new direction of research? Your advisor kind of gives you something.
Yeah.
But, in my case, I went to a conference and figured out what would be way more interesting research to do. So you're doing that. But that's all professional development.
Yeah, of
and you
course.
just get better and better at that. And then, if you get a professorship position, you then have to learn how to mentor other people and lead that and
It's
choose
just
the right projects.
a lifelong learning.
There's a lot to learn, and it's hard. Okay, and it's easy to get discouraged.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in graduate school, one particular event was I was trying to make these Joseon junctions, and I just couldn't get it to work for
Right.
months.
Yeah.
Okay, and I was thinking, well, what am I doing here? This is such a waste
Yeah.
of time.
That's very, very relatable.
Yeah, and you know, I was working hard, and then I decided we were using this one piece of equipment that was completely contaminated with gallium, it turns out.
Okay.
Okay, so I decided, okay, I've done everything else. I now have to clean out the machine. So I spent about a half a day, maybe 3/4 a day, just taking it apart and cleaning it.
Right.
You know,
Deep
ugly.
clean.
It's the last thing you want to do. But it only took half a day, and then
Yeah.
I made it the next day, and it worked,
And-
and
oh,
then
okay.
I was all happy again because you know. And it was like what I learned from that is don't shy away from something because it's just dull drudgery work.
Yeah.
Because that might be the most efficient way to spend your time. It's
Yeah.
just what you have to do.
That's
And
great
there's a lot of
advice.
things like that. And then the hard part is sometimes you just have to work through it, or
Yeah.
most of the time, but sometimes it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And you
right.
know, you have to figure out if that's the
Yeah.
case and whether you want to do something else. Most of the time, though, your advisor has a good sense of whether it's doable,
Yeah.
and you know, you have to work hard.
Yeah.
And you
I
just
mean,
have,
of
and it's
course,
just
yeah.
and in your career, you're always going to have these kind of, let's say, setbacks.
Yeah.
It's just part of it, and you have to have the perseverance to keep
Yeah.
going.
I think this is a very important conversation to have because I feel, especially in physics and mathematics, there's a lot of young people that might be scared of these subjects, that they're very hard or what's going on. And I always feel like that's part of it, right? To be confused.
Yeah, and part of it is you're trained by solving problem sets.
Yeah.
And you
Oh,
know
yeah,
that
that's
you know
true.
there's a solution. And,
Yeah.
you know, you can look it
Yeah.
up on
That's
the
not
internet.
that's not research.
But no research, and you have to choose the right problem that is just hard enough that no one's done it before,
But easy enough
but
for
not
you.
too hard that you can't solve. Or
Yeah.
maybe you can solve it, but you need 10 years of research to get there, and you
Right.
can't do that right now. So
Yeah.
choosing the project is very important, and you do that with your advisor because they have more
Yeah.
experience. Or maybe you talk to other people, you talk to other experts in the field.
Yeah.
Right, and you figure out, you know, you have to figure out what resources you're going to use.
Yeah.
I imagine if you're doing theory, you want to talk to other people and
Of course. Yeah.
get some experimental work. It's more getting into the lab, but you do
Yeah,
need
but-
to ask for help. You know, when
Yeah,
you're stuck.
yeah, of course. I mean, I spent a lot of time being confused, and then after a week or months, you might finally understand something, and that's
Right.
always
Yeah.
a joy.
You know, and then over time, instead of weeks or months, it's days or weeks.
Yeah.
Right, and you get better at it. Or you get better at understanding that something's impossible, and okay, I should do something else. Okay, in
Yeah.
the beginning, that's very hard to know.
Yeah.
You don't have that intuition.
Yeah.
But
That's nice to
I
hear.
find that so interesting about doing research
Yeah.
is because experience does matter. You can be
Yeah.
brilliant at solving, problems,
Yeah.
your class problems.
Sure. Yeah.
But doing the research is very different.
Yeah. No, it's an amazing thing to learn. I think I'm happy that
Good.
I'm on that journey. If I can ask you another question.
Okay.
So, what about outside of your work? Like, how do you maintain the balance between work and
Okay.
free time?
So in graduate school,
Yeah.
I started rock climbing,
Wow.
which is kind of an intense sport, if you
Yeah.
might
Do you
think.
still do that?
I did it until maybe 10 years ago, and I have back problems.
Sure.
I could still do it if I want, but I did it for many years. But I liked it because it kind of the intense concentration. And
Yeah.
we used to go to Yosemite Valley, Yosemite Tuolumne Meadows, and when you're leading a pitch, you're
Yeah.
just so focused on your moves and where you're going to put the protection
Yeah.
and all these things that I found it very healthy because I forgot about physics completely forgot
yeah.
about physics for the
Yeah.
weekend. And then I came back very refreshed.
Yeah. I am.
So I actually donated my guidebook to Tuolumne Meadows,
did
Yosemite,
you?
to the Nobel Museum with the
Yeah.
story, which is good. They like things like that. I have to. There's a couple other
love
things we
that.
need to send them. And then I did that for years, and I did mountain bike riding, And
Wow.
I've had some back problems the last 10, 15 years.
Mm.
So I do a lot of hiking now.
Mm.
And there's really a wide range of hikes in Santa Barbara,
Yeah.
well, more or less behind my house even. And I do that.
Nice.
And I find that if, you know, okay, I actually think about physics in my spare time, but it's a good place to think about physics and
Yeah.
try to solve
Oh,
various
right.
problems.
Walking and
And what I find is you have the runner's high when
right.
you do
Sure.
that. So you can actually be pretty creative, you know, when you're hiking
Yeah. So
and
that has
thinking
happened
about.
to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that helps me be creative. But
Cool.
the only problem is when when you get back to your house at night and you think about it the next day, you immediately throw out half of your ideas because you were on some dopamine hit
Right.
from the runner's
What was I
high instead
thinking?
of actually being. But you know that still leaves you a lot left
Yeah.
to think about.
Oh, that's
But
cool.
yeah, I like to think about the problems and think about them with a fundamental solution,
Yeah.
so that you really try to think about it from a fundamental physics or fundamental management principles or organizational principles, so that you really understand exactly how you want to solve a problem. And you have to be free thinking. And then, of course, you want to talk to other people too. I
Right.
mean, that's just
Yeah.
step one.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Amazing.
And my wife and I go to a weekly dance class
Oh, do
for
you?
yes,
Are
for
you a dancer?
ballroom dancing.
Ballroom dance.
Ballroom
That's
dancing.
so
So I'm
nice.
not the greatest dancer, but we have a very good teacher.
Who do you think is the most proud of you?
Most proud of me.
Yeah. And the
Oh,
work you've done.
um, I haven't been asked that question.
Mm.
I think just my wife and my family
Yeah.
are doing that. And I'm going to say that I've had some hard times in the last 5 years. You know, I left Google. You
Right.
know, I started that project at Google, and I was head, and then things stopped working out, and that was really hard on me
Yeah.
by the way that all happened. And I'm kind of. It's nice. It's
It's nice that it
nice.
worked out.
It's nice that it worked out. And then
Yeah.
I've had we did a startup company because
Yeah.
we think we want to build the qubits in a different
Yeah.
way, and I would say it's easier to raise money after the Nobel Prize.
Which is so important for research, of course. We need
Yeah, you
scientific
always have to
funding.
raise
Yeah.
money, and we have a very we're working on the fabrication of qubits, and it's kind of hard to do. Most people don't want to do that. We have some what we think are compelling reasons to do it, and it's nice to be able to talk
Yeah.
about that.
Of course.
And yeah, the prize, Nobel Prize, does help with with our company. I
I'm
appreciate
very
that.
happy for you. And your family, of course. So how did people around you react? How,
Well, everyone has been really nice
yeah.
and congratulating.
Were they
I mean,
surprised?
oh, I was surprised. Now, let me put some context into it. When you do a noteworthy experiment, and lots of people do that,
Yeah.
and a field is starting up and becoming important, the Nobel Foundation does Nobel symposiums
Yeah.
where they invite the leading people in, and you come give a talk. And you know, I think it's clear that they're checking out the field and checking
Yeah.
out the people and
Yeah.
see what's this is getting information. And I'm going to say, as a practical thing to aspire to,
Hmm.
I would say aspiring to be able to go to a Nobel symposium is something attainable. You
Hmm.
know, you have to do good work, but
Yeah.
it's something you can
Yeah.
imagine
It's not a
happening
Nobel
to you.
Prize.
So I felt that was practically just the highest honor I would probably get.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. But then getting the call, okay, is it's just really amazing, and yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I think a lot of people supported us to make it happen, and I'm
Of
very
course.
appreciated,
Yeah. Yeah.
for that.
What a dream call, I can imagine.
Yeah, it kind of changes your life, but it's very fun, and I enjoy things like this,
Yeah.
especially talking to students and students talking about, well, how do you how do you have a good career and be successful?
Yeah.
Good questions.
Interesting.
It's a
Yeah.
hard thing. It's a hard thing to figure
Yeah.
out how
No,
to do that.
we're very grateful.
Yeah, yeah,
It's very inspiring, of course, to learn about people's careers,
yeah.
especially the
Okay.
Nobel Prize laureates. So I think we're the thankful ones. Speaking of that, do you have any advice for younger students or something that you would tell your younger selves?
So the story I tell is this is it's what my parents did. My parents didn't go to college.
Okay.
My father, in fact, was a child soldier when he was 13, came
Oh,
to this
wow.
country
Okay.
when he was probably 17 or so, self-made.
Yeah.
He was a fireman, so, you know, he had to study and know how fires work. It's a physically demanding and mentally demanding thing where
Absolutely.
you need to know what you're doing or, you know, something bad can happen to
Yeah.
you. So he loved being a fireman because he's kind of analytical thinking, although he would make
Problem solving.
although creative solving, and you have to memorize a lot of
Yeah.
stuff, know a lot of stuff, understand how fires work,
Yeah.
right? Kind of intuitively. But yeah, he didn't go to college. But what was really interesting with my parents is what happened around the dinner table.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you experience this, if you have kids at some point, you'll understand this. Your kids come home, you're eating dinner, and it's like, oh, what did you do today?
Yeah.
The parents. And the kids will roll their eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, well, we did this or that.
Yeah.
Okay, we understand.
Yeah, that's like me
we
and my
understand.
sister.
Okay, yeah, you understand that.
Yeah.
But what my parents did is they said, did you ask any questions today?
Oh, that's great.
It's a very, very nice thing because, well, it's more interesting for one,
Yeah.
but also it trains the child to
Yeah.
think like a scientist
Yeah,
because that's what we want to do.
absolutely.
So, like all this week, I've been asking a bunch of questions about everyone
Yeah.
they're meeting. I think we did that a little
Yeah.
bit today. And it just becomes something that you do. Now, Bill Phillips, who's a Nobel Prize winner, I think 97. I mean, is even more so than I am on this.
I see.
But there's a few people who are well known for this,
Oh, but I love
and
that.
I always like that, and just it's a way for me to get engaged. But
Yeah,
the
it's
only problem
curiosity.
is people can get annoyed at you for asking too many questions. But and then the other thing for students is people kind of embarrassed that they're going to ask a dumb question. Okay, and you have to kind of get over that. So what was funny is after the chemistry lecture, I went to one of the chemistry laureates,
Yeah.
and I was going to ask a
A
question.
stupid question.
But I was, yeah. So I prefaced it. Oh, I think this is kind of dumb, but okay.
Yeah.
But I
Those are
asked it
questions.
anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said, "Hey, that's a really good question." And he explained what was going on.
Yeah.
So the question is really dumb. It's
Yeah.
like, what's the role of the metal in this lattice?
Yeah.
Like, why do you have to have a metal? And then it has to do with the bond and not being strong as the covalent, and it sets up, the way it all self assembles. So, and I'm sure he said that in the lecture, but I just didn't quite understand it. But and then it would lead to other questions.
Yeah, of course.
But I learned a lot because I asked my dumb question. Okay.
Of course. Okay, that's a great advice. It was lovely talking to you. Thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot. It was truly an honor, honestly.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it too.